I've always been drawn to the quiet corners of life, where the world seems to breathe a little slower, and the colors are muted but somehow more vibrant for it. My wife, Diana, shares this affinity with me. We found our haven in the suburbs, surrounded by the gentle rhythms of family life and the comforting predictability of nature's cycles. Together, we built an existence that was at once simple and rich in texture. A modest home filled with the detritus of children now grown and moved away. A garden where we planted flowers whose beauty we could admire but never quite capture through art or lens, and a small studio for me to paint in. My brushstrokes have always been expressive, capturing the turbulence beneath our calm surface. Diana, with her empathetic ears and steady gaze, tended to the emotional landscapes of those around us while navigating her own. Her work as a therapist demanded compassion, but it was a trait she wore well outside the office too, even when the threads of patience were thinning at home. Financial struggles had long been our shared burden. My art never brought in enough to support two households, let alone the added expenses of our aging house that refused to modernize gracefully. We lived in a delicate dance of budgeting and borrowing, always with an eye toward tomorrow. Yet on this particular evening, as dusk painted our living room walls with strokes of lavender, and I could feel the conversation twisting into something more ominous, the dishes piled up, ignored in favor of words that felt too sharp for comfort. "You can't just keep painting all day," Diana said, her voice a mix of frustration and weariness. "The bills don't pay themselves, Robert." "I know," I replied, my tone laced with the same tension she spoke against. "I'm working on it. The exhibition is coming up. Things will get better once we're through this." A beat passed, heavy with unsaid words. "The exhibition has been good for us before," Diana pressed on, her voice now a relentless drumbeat in my mind. "But how long can we keep holding on to something that's starting to slip?" It was as if the floor beneath our feet shifted, the ground rules of our marriage no longer applying. This wasn't just about money. It was an acknowledgement that the scaffolding beneath us had begun to crumble. We both knew then, in the quiet moments and the cacophony of unspoken fears, that we were standing on the edge of a precipice. Our conversation, once meandering through the mundane, now faced the stark reality of change. The next few months would bring an avalanche of decisions, legal separations, financial restructuring, the painful process of untangling lives so intertwined they seemed to share a single heartbeat. But tonight, we were only beginning our descent into a world where everything we thought we knew about ourselves and each other would be challenged. As Diana rose from her chair, the sound of her footsteps echoed more loudly than ever before, a countdown to change that neither of us could halt or even fully understand yet. The first step in this new journey was to accept the reality of our situation. But I was still holding onto the edges of what we had been, afraid to let go and fall into the unknown, where my paintbrushes lay silent and my canvas awaited a story I wasn't sure how to tell anymore. I watched as Diana closed the door behind her, leaving me alone with the weight of our silence. And in that moment, something inside me shattered like glass underfoot, the illusion of control, perhaps, or the belief that we could bend time back into submission. All I was left with was the ache of loss and a question that loomed as large as the sky outside. What now? The silence that followed Diana's departure lingered, thick in the air like the scent of fresh paint. I sat for a long while, unmoving, as if hoping that somehow the emptiness would fill itself up with an explanation, a reassurance that this was just another chapter in our predictable lives. But nothing came. Eventually, my body remembered its need to breathe, and with a sigh, I stood up from the couch, leaving behind the creases where my head had rested during our last conversation. My gaze fell upon the canvas that leaned against the wall of my studio, unfinished, a half-hearted attempt at capturing the beauty in our fading piece. With a resigned glance, I turned away and walked to the kitchen, my movements mechanical as I began preparing dinner for one rather than two. The simple act of chopping vegetables was almost therapeutic, a focus on the mundane that kept me from spiraling into thoughts I didn't know how to process. I served myself the meal, but instead of eating, I found myself standing by the window overlooking our garden, a space we had once envisioned as the epitome of tranquility. Now it felt like a monument to the life we were leaving behind. As night fell, I finally ate, each bite tasting slightly bitter with the knowledge that it was my last meal as part of this unit. The house seemed larger than usual, echoing the loneliness that crept in through the cracks of our disintegrating bond. After clearing away the dishes, I retreated to my studio, seeking solace in the familiar comfort of paint and canvas. But instead of creating, I found myself staring at the palette, at the swatches of color representing a world that had been too vivid for me to capture with simple strokes. It was then that the phone rang, an intrusion into the fragile solitude I had wrapped around myself. I hesitated before answering, not sure if I wanted to hear Diana's voice, but eventually succumbed to curiosity or perhaps hope. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Diana," her voice, but not quite the warm embrace it usually was. "We need to talk about this." I braced myself for an argument, for a fight that would spill over into more hurtful words. Instead, she spoke with a calmness that unnerved me, a calmness I didn't mirror. "I've been thinking," she said, her pause hanging between us like a fragile bridge. "We can't keep living in limbo. I think we should consider counseling, not just for ourselves, but for the kids too." Counseling? Was she suggesting we were on the brink of something even more catastrophic than our current situation? A failure so monumental that it required the guidance of professionals? "I don't know," I managed to say, my voice betraying a flicker of fear. "Is this really what we need?" "It's at least worth trying," Diana insisted, her resolve apparent despite the crack in her confidence. I remained silent for a moment, considering the implications, facing our problems head-on rather than allowing them to fester into irreparable damage. The thought was daunting, but possibly the first step toward healing. "All right," I conceded after too long a pause. "We can try counseling." Her sigh of relief was audible, even from miles away. Maybe this decision marked a turning point for us, an acceptance that our lives were changing in ways we didn't yet understand, and that facing them together might be the only way to keep parts of what we once had. As we made tentative plans for our first session, I couldn't shake off a sense of uncertainty. What would counseling achieve? Could it truly mend the fractures that ran deep within us? But as I looked around at my studio, half-finished paintings, scattered sketches, remnants of dreams, I realized that maybe this was the first step toward finding new colors to paint with, even if the canvas wasn't as familiar as before. For now, I would have to trust in the possibility that we could navigate this uncertain path together. As I put down the phone after speaking to Diana, a small spark of hope flickered within me, a promise of renewal yet to be revealed. And in the quiet corner of my studio, amidst the chaos of creativity left unattended, I found myself reaching for another brush, ready to begin painting the story that stretched out before us into the unknown. The first rays of dawn crept through the half-closed blinds of my studio, casting an ethereal glow over the chaotic scene within. Paint tubes lay scattered across the table, their colors muted by yesterday's frustration and uncertainty. My brushes stood in silent protest, dipped into a sea of forgotten possibilities. With a deep breath, I picked up a new canvas, stretching it with the same ritualistic care that had been my solace for years. It was time to start anew, not just in this physical gesture, but in embracing the change that loomed ahead like an uncharted territory. The phone rang again, shrill and insistent, tearing me away from the delicate task of priming the canvas with a coat of gesso. I hesitated before answering, wondering if Diana would call again so soon after our conversation, but this time it was not her voice on the other end. Robert, it was Corinne, my sister-in-law and Diana's best friend since high school. She had always been forthright, her no-nonsense attitude a counterbalance to Diana's empathetic nature. I heard about what's happening with you too. Her directness was both a comfort and an intrusion. I cleared my throat, the words feeling foreign as they left my lips. Yes, it's true. We're trying to figure things out. I see, Corinne replied, her tone measured. Diana called me last night. She's worried sick about you both, and the kids are caught in the middle trying to make sense of this themselves. I acknowledged her words with a silent nod, feeling the weight of responsibility for my family's well-being settle heavier on my shoulders. Corinne continued, Listen, Robert, I know it's hard, but you need to communicate better. Diana wants to work through this together, but she needs you to meet her halfway. I know, I said again, a little more forcefully this time. I'm trying, Corinne, it's just, everything feels so uncertain right now. That's because it is, Corinne stated bluntly. And uncertainty isn't something we can paint over with pretty colors or brushstrokes. You're going to have to dig deeper into yourselves and your marriage. Her words struck a chord within me. I realized that while my art was an outlet for expression, this challenge required more than just creating an emotional symphony. It demanded harmony. Thank you, Corinne, I said sincerely. I'll talk to Diana about this, and maybe we can involve the kids in our conversations too. They need to understand what's happening and why. Corinne sighed, a sound of relief mixed with sadness. That's all I can ask for. Be honest with each other, Robert. It's going to be tough, but you two have always been strong together. After hanging up the phone, I felt a renewed sense of resolve, as if Corinne's words had given me permission to proceed into the unknown. With new determination, I turned back to my canvas. The first strokes of paint were tentative, hesitant like my steps into this new chapter. But with each passing moment, the color seemed to flow more naturally, reflecting the inner turmoil and hope entwined within me. This wasn't just about creating art. It was a form of excavation, laying bare my fears, insecurities, and the desperate clinging to what once was. The colors began to blend into something vibrant yet complex, a mural that told the story of our marriage and its imperfections. There were moments of brilliance interspersed with shadows of doubt and pain. It wasn't just about Diana and me anymore. It was about the family we had created together, a tapestry of shared history and now uncertain futures. As I stepped back to survey my work in progress, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The painting wasn't finished, but neither was our journey. It would continue with all its challenges and potential for growth. In this moment of reflection, amidst the shifting sands of change, there was a glimmer of hope that perhaps together we could forge a new path forward. One that acknowledged the past yet embraced the possibility of something new, beautiful, and real. The colors on my canvas danced with life, promising that even in the darkest moments, light was never too far away to illuminate our way. And so I picked up another brush, ready to continue painting this uncharted territory, both literally and metaphorically. It would be a journey into the depths of myself and back again, towards Diana and the future we were yet to build together. The uncertainty was daunting but no longer overwhelming. It was simply part of our story now. In that sense, like any great work of art, our life was still being written, stroke by stroke. As weeks turned into months, the uncertainty that once loomed over me like a storm cloud began to dissipate into the crisp morning air. The counseling sessions with Diana started to yield results, small cracks in the wall of our once shared fortress slowly giving way to light and understanding. Together, we had embarked on a journey of self-discovery and reconciliation, a path paved with open communication and trust-building exercises that stretched beyond the comfort zone of both of us. Our children, too, seemed to breathe easier as they witnessed their parents' efforts at mending what was broken. The sessions were not without their challenges. There were moments when we stumbled over each other's words, when the wounds of past grievances reopened like unattended sores. But with the help of our therapist and the support system we had built around us, a network of friends and family who, behind our cause, we found the strength to persevere. Meanwhile, my art flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. The therapy sessions themselves became an inspiration for me. The colors on my canvas began reflecting not just my emotions, but also the complex dynamics within our family unit. One particular piece I titled Fracture and Fidelity, a double-spread canvas capturing the jagged lines of conflict that ran through us, yet also highlighting the unbreakable bonds of love that persisted despite everything. It was a testament to the resilience we all shared, Diana, me, and our children, as we navigated this new reality. The exhibition came and went, its timing almost symbolic given the metamorphosis unfolding within our home. While my art received critical acclaim, I found myself less interested in the accolades than in the private victories that belonged to us alone. Financial struggles still loomed large on the horizon, but we tackled them head-on, making painful decisions about downsizing and restructuring our lives to accommodate a future uncertain. It was not easy, but it felt authentic, a necessary step towards rebuilding from the ground up. One day, during one of our many late-night conversations, Diana turned to me with eyes that sparkled more brightly than I had seen in years. "Robert," she said softly, yet with a conviction that sent shivers down my spine, "I think this might be it, not just for us, but for our future together." "What is?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Our second chance," she replied, her words carrying the weight of hope. "A fresh start, free from the burdens and regrets that chained us before. We've talked about our fears, our dreams, now it's time to turn them into something real." I was taken aback by the raw beauty of her suggestion. A second chance. It was not a word I had dared to entertain in my own thoughts. But as Diana reached out and took my hand, her touch sending a jolt of electricity through me, I felt it, the promise of rebirth that only she could see. In the end, it wasn't just about us. It was about what we could rebuild together, stronger than ever before. Our marriage transformed into something more profound, an unbreakable covenant forged in the crucible of adversity and strengthened by our refusal to let go. The counseling sessions continued until we both felt the need for them no more. The children adjusted to their new reality, finding their own paths towards healing within this changed landscape. And as for me, my art became a reflection of not just one person or another, but an expression of our collective journey, our shared trials and the resilience that carried us through. Diana and I never went back to being the same people we were before. We emerged from the storm tempered like fine steel, ready to face whatever life had in store for us. And with every sunrise after that momentous decision, we felt a little more whole, a little less broken. In this new chapter of our lives, there was no turning back. We stepped forward into the unknown hand in hand, as co-creators of our story. The canvas of our existence stretched out before us like an endless sea, and though it was frightening to imagine what lay ahead, we were ready to paint a masterpiece from the fragments of our brokenness. This was not just our survival, this was our rebirth. And in that moment, as we stood together against the backdrop of our future uncertain yet bright with possibilities, I knew that we would never be content to live in the shadows of what could have been. We were ready for whatever came next, a life bold and vivid, painted with strokes of love, resilience, and hope. In the end, like any great work of art, our story had reached its climax not with a crescendo of drama, but with the serenity of acceptance and growth. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most profound rebirths require us to let go of control and allow ourselves to be painted anew by life's unexpected colors. And so we stood together, ready for whatever came next, a future full of promise, built on the shifting sands of change and anchored by our unwavering commitment to each other. The canvas of our life was far from complete, but in this moment of rebirth, we knew that as long as we stood side by side, there would always be beauty yet to be created together. This is our story, a testament to the power of love and resilience, not just within marriage but within ourselves. It's a reminder that endings are often just preludes to new beginnings. It's about learning to see the colors in the chaos and painting with courage, hope, and an open heart. For us, the real story was only just beginning, one we would write together, stroke by stroke, into the canvas of eternity.